The Bedrock project is a massive underground perimeter I've been digging underneath my base for years. The area represents the full range of all 64 beacons I've lined up in a grid at Bedrock, and at 7 blocks tall, this is amounted to over 1 million blocks excavated. But despite that, it's nowhere near finished. The big genius move on my part was to do this. Dig out all the material between the bedrock and replace it with black stained glass. Advantage, it looks really cool. Disadvantage, it takes me about 10 minutes to do one chunk of black stained glass, and there are still a ton of chunks left to go. So far, I've completed a respectable 108, but in the end, I'll have to do another 517 chunks, and at 10 minutes per chunk, I'm not great at math, but I'm pretty sure that sucks. Beyond that, there's a bunch more work I'd like to do to get things around here decorated and improved, and that work won't be light either. This is definitely going to be my biggest video yet in terms of raw work, but despite that challenge, I'm seeing it through to completion. You saw the title of the video, it's finally time to finish the Bedrock project. I've got a plan. I'm gonna go top down. So I'll start by doing the ceiling, and then the walls, and then, saving the best for last, I'll tackle the behemoth that will be the stained glass floor. For the ceiling, I want to raise it up a few blocks before I decorate it. I've always felt it's just been a little low because you can hardly see the beacon beams in the distance, and the overall scale of the area just feels underrepresented. The low ceilings also give me a very limited range of motion to use for my replay camera, and I think that by raising it up a few blocks, I'll have a lot more room to play with. So, with that all in mind, check this out. I've gone ahead and, above the old ceiling, dug out the entire perimeter 3 blocks tall. That means that when I do remove this final layer, we are looking at a 4-block extension. If I'm honest though, I would have liked to push it even further. But the problem was I ran into this area here, and this netherrack is actually the bottom of the dwarven throne room I built last episode. Not wanting to rip apart and redesign any of that, I opted to keep the ceiling right here. The only problem is that now there's a bunch of exposed netherrack that I don't want showing up in the final product, and I figured the best solution would be slabs. I went ahead and put together a schematic for the whole ceiling and used Lightmatica's easy place mode to streamline the process. Some people might find this a little cheaty, and I won't argue. It's essentially a glorified printer, and I agree that there is something special about doing things genuinely by hand in Minecraft, and that gets completely lost with Lightmatica. That being said though, I feel like if there ever was an opportune time to use it, it would be now. I haven't mentioned it yet, but the perimeter is 400 by 400 blocks, which means that each layer is made up of 160,000 blocks. That's 46 double chests of material, or in my case, 46 double chests of slabs. This would have been brutal to do manually, and even with easy place mode placing the slabs while running, this still took me a whopping 14 hours to complete. So yeah, I stand by my decision to use it because I don't even want to know what it would have been otherwise. Alright, and welcome back to the finished ceiling, and you'll notice that this only consists of andesite and stone, which might seem a little silly considering the amount of effort I just put into it, but hear me out, right? When the project is done and the entire floor is covered with black stained glass, it's gonna be pretty dark, and a lot of the details that I could put into the ceiling just aren't gonna be super noticeable, so it's not really worth putting in that extra effort. But more importantly, on a large scale like this, I feel like doing micro details can risk looking a little overwhelming on a macro scale. TLDR, less is more. But I'd be remiss if I didn't have a little ace up my sleeve. You see, this is not just a simple mix of andesite and stone, it's actually a carefully designed texture. Now, this texture is not very visible from up here, but if we take a look using external tools, you'll maybe get a better idea of what I'm talking about. This is called Perlin noise, which is a type of gradient noise that can be randomly generated and engineered, and there are plenty of websites that help you do this. I messed around with one for a while, exported the PNG, and then converted that using a Minecraft map generator, which I could finally turn into a schematic. I think this is a fun little detail. Admittedly, I don't know how well it's going to show up in the final product, but I figured, hey, if I was going to be using a schematic, I might as well try and do something special. But now it's time for the grand reveal, because all that's left to do is remove this final layer of ceiling and see how we did. So, I was hoping that by raising the ceiling, things would feel less claustrophobic and the scale of this area would come across better. And boy, was I right. This place feels way more grandiose now, and the beacon beams are far more visible in the distance, thanks in part to another little detail I added, which are these vaulted reverse pyramid ceilings. It was kind of an afterthought, but it worked out really well because it gives the beams more height, and I think it just looks a lot better than if the entire ceiling was just flat. And of course, there's the texturing, which, surprise, surprise, isn't super visible, but even if I can't see it that well, I'm still really happy just knowing that it's there. I grabbed a quick night vision potion out of curiosity, and yeah, I actually think the purlin noise shows up decently well. Even if it's a little hard to see the full picture, what I like about it is there are some regions that are heavy with andesite and some regions that are heavy with stone. So it's almost like there are two different levels of texturing, one on a small scale and one on a large scale. All in all, the ceiling took me 74 hours to finish. That includes the digging, the slabs, the stuff you don't see like sorting my shulkers and repairing my tools. 74 hours, and I'm only scratching the surface.
I'm in danger!
You see, the thing about this project is everything that sounds simple on paper needs to be done on such a large scale. So something like raise the ceiling meant excavating 4 layers at 160,000 blocks a layer, and then cover it with another 160k in slabs. Luckily for me, the next item on my list, decorate the walls, only means covering a perimeter of 1,600 blocks. Not bad. As is the case with the ceiling, I'm also opting to keep the walls simple, and we can get a sneak peek of that right here. This is a staircase I designed in episode 12, which leads up to Blackstone Farmstead at the edge of Westfall. I explicitly designed this staircase based off of how I wanted the future wall design to go, and the pattern is very simple: pillar, 4-block gap, pillar, and these little notch details in every other bay. Fun fact, this was originally put here to dispense myself speed potions when riding donkeys to go back and forth up the staircase. But now that I'm not doing that anymore, I actually changed the autobrewer's recipe to make night vision potions instead. So now, when I want one, I can just come over here and step on the pressure plate. The only catch with this design is it's actually set back an additional 2 blocks from the original wall, which means I ain't done digging, and the final perimeter is actually going to be 402 by 402 blocks. I know, right? Scandalous. Alright, the perimeter is fully decorated and it only took me a respectable 22 hours of work to get it done. And with its completion, I gotta say, things are really starting to come together around here. Simple as it is, I think this pattern works really well all the way around. Not too boring on a micro scale, but not too overwhelming on a macro scale. The porridge is just right. And an unintended bonus is that because I did a border of adjacent glass, it means that the walls are already cloaked in a little bit of darkness, which really gives me a good idea of what the rest of this area is gonna feel like when it's done. By the way, I did the glass for two reasons. Number one, it just helps me chip away at it all. And number two, because it reveals parts of the wall that I needed to reach all the way down. Matching what I did with the ceiling, I'm only using andesite and stone for the walls. So that meant I had to go in and switch out patches of dirt or granite that were down there in the bedrock. And I also took the time to extend the basalt pillars down through the air gaps. And I think little details like this make a big difference. Sure, you could just leave the pillars floating on the top and it would probably look fine, but this way it's properly embedded and actually looks structural. It's funny though, because honestly, the majority of the work that went into these walls were just for the floor chunks. So if I hadn't done all that, these walls would have only taken a few solid hours at most, not 20. And that's a great little preview into the grind that will be the rest of the floor. For now though, I'll take this little victory, and I have technically worked on the floor now. About 51 chunks are on the board, which means this project is slightly closer to completion. But before I go any further, I'd like to pump the brakes for a moment and talk a little bit about how the sausage is getting made. Over here in these bays, you can see I've actually got a huge array of chests, and this is where I've been building up the stockpile of sand that will be needed to finish the rest of the floor. I've been periodically making farming trips out to the desert here and there, manually digging out the sand and bringing it home, working to eventually reach my quota of 500,000. And I'm pleased to say that I should be there by now. I'm currently sitting on 102 double chests, which should be plenty in order to finish the rest of the floor. But of course, this stuff isn't ready to go, is it? First, it needs to get smelted, and to do that, we gotta take a trip upstairs. One of the big reasons I added this ravine was because I thought ahead to this exact moment, and I wanted to have a way of conveniently being able to go from the Bedrock project up to my Dwarven Tunnel project. Because up here is where I've been taking my sand to get smelted in the Dragon Forge. I absolutely love this thing. It's probably my favorite project so far, but I don't know, it's a tough line to draw. It's definitely up there though. And while that's doing its thing, I often go back down to the Bedrock project, and because it's in range, it means I can work and smelt simultaneously. So that hopefully means I can get through the rest of the project without having any downtime waiting for more glass. A lot of the time though, I do end up just chilling here in the throne room while I wait, because it's just really fun to see the minecarts come and go depositing the finished shulkers. Plus, of course, I can keep an eye on the face, which will turn off when the forge is finished. And very nice. So once I'm back with all the glass, all I have to do now is dye it. And thanks to my squid farm in Westfall, I have an ample supply of ink sacs. Actually, to be more accurate, I have more ink sacs than I have any idea what to do with. So yeah, dyeing all my glass won't be an issue. And this is always my favorite part. I use an autocraft feature that comes with the item scroller mod. Just load up your inventory, select the recipe, and hit the hotkey. Never gets old. Anyways, that's the glass grind. And I only did 10 shulkers for this demonstration, but remember, I've got to do it for all these double chests. And that's before I even get around to doing the actual work. Time to lock in. The first chunks I decided to fill in were the ones that surrounded my beacons. Just like with the walls, this step involved digging out parts of the floor in order to add details. In this case, I was extending the beacon pyramids into the bedrock, making it look like they fade into the floor. This effect looks really cool and makes the beacons feel more solid instead of just floating on top of the glass, just like the same situation I had with the basalt pillars. And as I'm sure you've noticed by now, the clips I have from my live streams show the glass looking a little different, and that's because I've been using a texture pack. You see, early on in this process, a viewer, Lime, sent me a texture pack in order to make it easier to see what I was doing. Instead of the normal low contrast black glass, Lime's glass, as we coined it, was instead very high contrast and clear. The texture is simply a transparent block with a lime border surrounding it. This made seeing through the glass crystal clear, making it easier to spot mistakes. Plus, the lime border made it very obvious when there were air gaps that I had missed. Combine all that with the help of a night vision potion and my workflow had become so much better. I was working faster, more effectively, and the process became far less stressful because I could actually see what I was doing. It was a lifesaver, and I wouldn't have had that without Lime, so huge shout out to him for his help. Alright, 12 hours later, and all my beacons are now surrounded with glass, and the pyramids are looking awesome. They fade into the bedrock, which works especially well at a distance, and this will all look really cool when everything else is done. Doing all those beacons allowed me to knock out another 73 chunks. Not a huge step, but with each advancement, the floor fills in more and more, and the closer I get to finally finishing this project. Which brings me to my next task, because these slimes have gotta go. Throughout the lifetime of this project, I've had to contend with an enormous amount of slimes because, of course, if you dig a big hole underground, you're gonna reveal slime chunks. And that, coupled with the fact that I've thoroughly mob-proofed all the caves and crevices around my base, means that the rates have become quite significant. Enough to the point where it's typical practice to have to slap some away every couple minutes, which might not sound bad, but trust me, it gets old. I'm just ready to get popped. It's gonna happen anytime now. I'm about to get slimed. I'm gonna get slimed. Yep, there it is. I'm not exactly complaining though. This has had very lucrative results. I just don't need to push those results any further, and it's time to get rid of them. So, seeing that I was already filling in the glass by chunks at a time, it felt very fitting to then exclusively target and fill the slime chunks. And thanks to MiniHUD, this was a very easy process. The mod generates transparent green overlays inside the corresponding chunks, making it a simple process to identify which chunks needed to be filled. I was really glad that I decided to take care of this now, because it would mean that for the remainder of the project, I wouldn't be bothered by slimes anymore, and things would go a lot smoother. Plus, I'm a big fan of any methods to break this project down into smaller steps, considering how colossal the task of covering the floor is. All in all, there were 43 total slime chunks to fill in, and as I knocked them out one by one, I began to notice their spawns drop off more and more, until finally I had made it to the last chunk, and when I was done, there wasn't a single slime left in sight, and none to ever be seen again. It's funny because mob-proofing against slimes was actually the original reason why I decided to do the glass floor in the first place. Slimes can't be prevented using light, so you have to use non-spawnable blocks such as glass. My original idea was to just cover it over like this, but I immediately disliked it because it just felt kinda cheap, so that led me to the chaotic idea of filling in all the material below as well, and thus, the Bedrock project was born. Of course, I could have just used slabs instead, which would have made my life so much easier. But hey, I'm a glutton for punishment, I guess. So let's see where we're at now, because with the completion of those 43 slime chunks, I'm now sitting at nearly the halfway point, which is actually a rather exciting milestone because up to this point, it's felt like I've been taking smaller steps. Decorating the ceiling, decorating the walls, going around my beacons, and now the slime chunks. But all of that added together has actually brought me closer to the finish line than I realized I was. And despite having 340 chunks left to go, I'm energized and ready to begin the long haul. That's a nice oak wood door right there. And so the final step of my journey had begun. With nothing left to do but fill the rest of the floor with glass, I put my head to the grindstone and got to work. I streamed as much as I could and consistently pulled 8-hour streams. The light was visible at the end of the tunnel and I was eagerly reaching out for it. I'd gotten the glass down to a science at this point. Digging it out was easy until I reached the lower sections, then it required a lot of focus and precision. Using Elytra, I was able to jam myself into every nook and cranny, making sure everything was removed before I started to fill it all back in. I'd stop once I made it back to Y4, which sits a block below the top layer of Bedrock. And I did this because for the final 2 layers, I used my rapid click macro to spam the rest of the glass. It's my favorite part of the process because it's so satisfying and so quick. As I moved along, I'd keep tabs on my glass supply and run the super smelter when I was getting low. This ensured that I never had any downtime to restock and I could continuously work on the floor. In summation, I was cruising along, making my way across the Bedrock project like a printer, knocking out strip by strip at a time until something weird happened. You see, a while back, one of my viewers, Mooncatcher, made the recommendation to spell out my name along the floor as I was filling it in, which I thought was a fun idea, but I couldn't figure a way to make it happen and said no. To which Moon then responded and sent me this. Enough said. This is why I love live streaming. It's collaborative, ideas are shared, and my projects are different from how they would be if I would have just done it alone. And even though it was eventually going to get filled in, doing this and including it in the video immortalizes it as part of the story. But if you want the real reason why I did this, my answer is, it's a mystery. Which leaves me with only 58 chunks left to go. 58 mysterious chunks, and weirdly enough, they felt quicker. In fact, this whole project felt quicker. I had it in my head that this would all be a massive undertaking, and believe me, it did take a ton of work, but it wasn't as bad as I was expecting. I think that because it sat incomplete for so many years, I was imagining that actually finishing it would be so much more of a burden, but it wasn't. Instead, reaching the finish line felt as casual as anything else. So I just finished. Just like that, my journey was over and I began to admire my work. The mystery had been filled in and the floor was finally finished. It took 90 hours of work and nearly 500,000 glass blocks to fill in all 625 chunks, but it was worth it because the Bedrock project was finally done. The only other thing to do was go around and complete some quality control, which, thanks to Mooncatcher again, I was able to complete using another special texture pack. This one made other blocks glow red, which made it very easy for me to fly around and spot missing blocks in the bedrock. And so for fun, I decided to count each mistake I found as I went along. But this stopped being fun very quickly as soon as I realized how much there actually was. I'll spare myself the ridicule, but let's just say that there are 229 reasons I'm not as perfect as I think I am. Which brings me to this moment right here, because the Bedrock project is now officially done, and it's time to throw my shaders on and admire the final product. This project is so sick. Everything came together so well. It's dark, it's simple, it's vast, and the beacons look so cool. Because they're the only source of light, they stand out really well. And again, I think blending them into the bedrock really helps ground them into the floor. Nothing else should be trying to steal the spotlight down here, which is why I think it was a really good idea to keep the ceilings and walls minimal. They look nice, but they're not a spectacle. And what do I even have to say about the floor? It looks amazing, and the room is so dark that the glass is almost invisible, which puts the bedrock on full display. One especially cool thing, if you have dynamic lighting, is take a light source and just walk around. The dynamic lighting will illuminate around you and fade into the bedrock as you go. It's such a cool effect. I'm incredibly happy with how this all turned out, and I feel especially relieved that this project is finally finished after so many years sitting as an unfinished mess. My world is a decade old at this point, and the first 5 years of its life were rather hazy because that was before I started showing it off on YouTube. What I can tell you though is the Bedrock project has been around for nearly its entire lifespan since it dates back to when I originally started to strip mine. The idea to turn it into the finished product we see today didn't really come into fruition until my first episode, but again, that was 5 years ago. And 3 of those years were spent putting out video after video, all under the umbrella that I was going to eventually finish the Bedrock project. 4 episodes for the Super Smelter, 5 episodes for Westfall, and finally, we are now here at this project's completion. It's been quite a journey, and one that's been admittedly painful for me because, if you didn't already know, the Bedrock project has been the linchpin to updating my world. I've been stuck on 1.16.4 for the last few years now, explicitly because I wanted to finish the Bedrock project before I updated to the Caves and Cliffs update, which changes where the existing Bedrock layer will go. Don't worry, it won't destroy this project, believe me, I checked, but it will change the Bedrock into Deep Slate, and I wanted to finish this project as it was originally meant to be before I made that change. And well, I did it. We can admire the Bedrock project as it is right now before it turns into the Deep Slate project, basically, and that would not have been possible had I not held off on updating. Whether or not that was worth it is a valid question though. God, there are so many features I've been missing out on. So with that, I think I'll leave you guys here and get right to work on the next episode because I've waited long enough. Thank you to everybody who has patiently waited for this episode to come out. It was a busy summer, and this was honestly a challenging video for me to make. I think I went through like 6 different scripts. So if you wouldn't mind, please hit that like button. It helps out the channel a ton, and subscribe if you want to see this world finally in the current version of the game. Thank you guys again, and I'll see you soon.